This video is political commentary and analysis based on publicly available information. It's not legal advice, and viewers should always consult primary sources and professionals for legal interpretation. Alright, we have breaking legal and political news that is way bigger than just one headline, and I'm going to explain why. The Supreme Court just delivered what President Trump and Attorney General Bondi are calling a monumental win. Not just for this administration, but for the structure of American government itself. Because what's been happening lately is something that should make anyone nervous, whether you love Trump or you can't stand him. We've had a growing trend where single district court judges, sometimes in a handful of political hotspots, can issue these sweeping nationwide injunctions that basically freeze an elected president's policies for the entire country. Not for the people suing, not for the state involved, for everyone, everywhere, immediately. That's not a small technicality, that's a power shift. That's a shadow veto. And today, the Supreme Court put serious limits on that. Now there's a second layer to the story. Birthright citizenship. And I'm going to be precise here because precision matters. The court's ruling is mostly about the court system's power and how injunctions are used, not the final constitutional decision on birthright citizenship itself. But this ruling opens the lane for the administration to move forward, and it signals a big change in how the executive branch can actually function.
The court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system. This was a colossal abuse of power which never occurred in American history prior to recent decades, and we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century, me. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she can talk as long as she wants, because this is a very important decision. This is decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud, and our country should be very proud of the Supreme Court today. And with that, I'd like you to listen to the words of Pam Bondi. She's an incredible Attorney General. We're very proud of her. And as you know, Todd Blanche is with us, and we have so many others that worked on this case and other cases. And I think they're doing a great job. Pam, please say a few words.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for fighting for all Americans. Americans are finally getting what they voted for. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation. No longer. Today, in the 6-3 opinion, Justice Barrett correctly holds that the district court lacks authority to enter nationwide or universal injunctions. These lawless injunctions gave relief to everyone in the world instead of the parties before the court. As the Supreme Court held today, they turned district courts into the imperial judiciary. Active liberal judges have used these injunctions to block virtually all of President Trump's policies. To put this in perspective, there are 94 federal judicial districts. 5 of those districts throughout this country held 35 of the nationwide injunctions. Think about that, 94 districts. And 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts in this country. No longer. No longer. These injunctions have blocked our policies from tariffs to military readiness to immigration to foreign affairs, fraud, abuse, and many other issues. The judges have tried to seize the executive branch's power, and they cannot do that. No longer. No longer. And on immigration, on a side note, today marks 2,711 arrests on these terrorists and these gangs. Total arrest today with HSI investigations. And thank you, Stephen Miller. Thank you to Homeland Security. Thank you to everyone working hand in hand with the FBI on all of these transnational gangs. TDA has been a huge terror to our country, as well as MS-13, as well as Sinaloa cartels. No longer. No longer. These injunctions have allowed district court judges to be emperors. They vetoed all of President Trump's power, and they cannot do that. This has been a bipartisan problem that has lasted 5 presidential terms, 5 different presidents, and it has ended today. We will continue to fight for President Trump's policies. I want to thank the Office of White House Counsel, Dave Warrington. You and your staff have been incredible. Our Solicitor General's office, John Sauer, Sarah Harris, and Todd Blanche and Emil Bovey. Todd's going to say a few words because we've had another major ruling today on transgender books and some other great wins that we've had. But no longer will they have this power in our country. It is the president's authority under his executive branch to do everything to fight for the American people, and he will continue to do that. That's why he was overwhelmingly elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's a great day for the rule of law. It's a great day for the Justice Department, and it's one that's been a long time coming and one that every American should have been waiting for with bated breath. And so I echo what the President said and Attorney General Bondi, that the Supreme Court did a great thing today, not only for this administration, but for every American in this country. If not for the injunctions case, we would be here talking about another great decision that came down today, the trans books case, which restores parents' rights to decide their child's education. Seems like a basic idea, but it took the Supreme Court to set the record straight, and we thank them for that. And now that ruling allows parents to opt out of dangerous trans ideology and make the decisions for their children that they believe is correct. And so we thank the Supreme Court for that. There's been multiple decisions over the past several weeks that just show why this nationwide injunction ban had to happen. For example, what I mean by that is local district court judges issuing decisions that are clearly contrary to law just because they don't like the policy of President Trump. And when it gets to the Supreme Court has to correct it. But that takes time. The Attorney General thanked our lawyers, and I'll do it again. Our lawyers are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to fight these injunctions and to emergency appeals, emergency stays, going back to the district court judge, asking them to change their view. And so their hard work is really paying off today, but over the past few weeks. We had a stay of an order that prevented DHS from moving aliens to a third country. We had a stay of an order that stopped the Department of Defense from implementing military readiness, the EO that President Trump signed. We had another stay of an order forcing reinstatement of fired executive branch employees, entirely within the President in Article 2, his right to do. We had a stay of, as you all know, of numerous DOJ cases. And again, every one of those stays requires a tremendous amount of work and effort by the lawyers and the parties involved, and they should be doing other work. They should be doing the work that the President and this administration demands and has a right to demand, and not fighting these local judges who don't make decisions based on the law. They make decisions because they just simply don't agree with the administration's decision about a policy, and that's wrong. Thank you.
So let's break this down, because this isn't just politics. This is about whether elections still have meaning, whether presidents can govern, and whether we are letting the judiciary become a kind of unelected super legislature. In America, you have Congress writing the laws, the president executing the laws, and the courts interpreting the laws. But what we've been watching is district courts acting like they can do all three: interpret, rewrite, and effectively halt the executive branch nationwide. A nationwide injunction is like a judge saying, I'm not just stopping this policy for the people in my courtroom, I am stopping it for the entire country. And that sounds efficient until you realize what it means. It means any president can be blocked by one judge. It means policy becomes judge shopping. It means the executive branch becomes a hostage to litigation. And it means the Supreme Court is forced to play cleanup while the country stalls. Now, the Supreme Court has stepped in and said, essentially, district courts don't have the unlimited authority to issue universal nationwide relief in the way they've been doing. And that is why President Trump and Attorney General Bondi are celebrating like this is the end of what they call rogue judges controlling national policy. Let me tell you why I view this as a win, and why I think a lot of Americans see it as a win. Because imagine this in any normal job context. Imagine you are hired as the CEO of a company. You come in with a plan, the board hires you to lead, and then a middle manager from one department says, nope, company-wide pause, I don't like your plan. That's what this has started to look like. And when Trump says the Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself, what he's really saying is this: we've normalized a system where the executive branch can be effectively paralyzed, not by Congress, not by voters, not even by the Supreme Court, but by lower courts issuing sweeping orders that function as policy weapons. This is why people use the phrase one judge veto, and it's also why, if you care about stability, you should want limits on that practice. Because here is the truth nobody wants to admit. If this tactic becomes the default tool of the losing political side, whoever that is at the moment, then every presidency becomes a lawsuit presidency. We stop being a country governed by elected leadership and we become a country governed by injunction warfare. And that's not democracy. That's bureaucratic sabotage. Now, I want to be careful with language here, because not every judge is corrupt. Not every judge is a partisan activist. But there's a reality we can't ignore. Some judges are ideologically aggressive. Some judges are politically in temperament. And certain districts have become magnets for lawsuits designed to produce nationwide stoppage. So when Bondi says imperial judiciary, the accusation is basically this: district courts are being used to create national policy outcomes, not just decide cases. And I think people underestimate how destabilizing that is, because it creates a system where policy does not flow from elections. Policy flows from legal ambushes. The executive branch spends its time appealing, staying, and fighting instead of governing. And here's the kicker: even if you like what the judge did today, you might hate what a judge does tomorrow. This is why the principle matters, not just the outcome. The Supreme Court stepping in isn't about crowning Trump king. It's about saying there are lanes. If you want national rules, you go through national level mechanisms, Congress or the Supreme Court, or proper class-wide legal tools. not one district judge doing nationwide policy by decree. Because if district judges can run the country, then elections become a reality show. The real government happens in courtrooms. Now, let's talk about the birthright citizenship angle, because this is the part that gets people emotional immediately. Here is what people need to understand. This ruling doesn't fully settle the constitutional question of Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. What it does do is remove or at least reduce the ability for lower courts to slap a universal pause on it immediately across all 50 states as the default move. So what happens next? You're likely going to see narrower injunctions that apply only to the plaintiffs in the case. Attempts to rebuild nationwide relief through class actions. A faster race toward the Supreme Court for the actual merits. So, in other words, this is not the final verdict. This is the procedural chokehold is weaker. And that's why the administration is celebrating, because it changes the playing field. Now, President Trump makes an argument that birthright citizenship was meant for the children of slaves after the Civil War, and that it is being exploited today. Whether you agree with that interpretation or not, the point is, the legal battle is now more likely to be decided at the right level, rather than being frozen indefinitely by lower courts. And from a governance standpoint, that's good. Because if a policy is unconstitutional, it should be struck down the right way, not stalled forever in procedural limbo. Here is the deeper point, and I want people to think about this. A nation cannot function if the president can't execute, Congress can't legislate effectively, and courts can freeze national policy at will. That creates a permanent state of chaos. If you are the political opposition and you can't win through legislation or elections, you just run to the courts and try to win there. And then we get a society where the left is furious when courts block them, the right is furious when courts block them, and the entire country starts treating judges like political gladiators instead of neutral arbiters. That is how trust collapses. So, for people cheering this decision, what they're really cheering is a correction, a rebalancing. Not because they want a dictator, but because they want a president to be able to do the job voters elected them to do, and then be judged at the ballot box. If the policy is bad, vote it out. If it's illegal, overturn it through proper channels. But don't let one judge become a national traffic cop for the entire country. A republic can survive bad precedents. A republic cannot survive a system where nobody is allowed to govern. There is also a mention of another major Supreme Court decision the same day, involving parents and school content, trans books, and parents' right to opt out. Now, whether someone agrees with that ruling or not, politically it adds to the sense that the Supreme Court is drawing sharper boundaries again. Boundaries on judicial reach, boundaries on institutional power, and boundaries on who decides what in society. And that's why they had the celebratory tone. They see it as a cluster of decisions that reinforce executive authority, parental authority, and limits on lower courts activism. To supporters, it feels like, finally, the guardrails have been restored. So here is my closing thought. Today's ruling matters because it pushes back against a growing habit in American life. The habit of trying to win politically by bypassing the public, not persuading voters, not building coalitions, not legislating, but litigating, freezing, stalling, and governing through the courts. And if we allow that to become normal, then the presidency becomes ceremonial, Congress becomes theatrical, and the real power becomes whoever can file the fastest lawsuit in the friendliest court. That's not what this system was built to be. So yes, I see this as a major win. A win for separation of powers, a win for the executive branch to function, and a win for the idea that policy should ultimately be decided by law, by elections, and by the Supreme Court when necessary, not by a rotating cast of district judges playing nationwide referee. Now we watch what happens next, because the birthright citizenship fight isn't over, but the era of the one-judge nationwide veto just took a serious hit. If you want the next breakdown as these cases move forward, subscribe, hit the like button, and drop your thoughts below. Do you think nationwide injunctions were a necessary safeguard, or did they become a political weapon?